Hello everybody, my name is Dr. Michael Obsatz and I'm here with you today to share something I think is really very important, and that's about consciousness and awakening and living your full authentic life and making a meaningful difference in the world. What's more important than that? So I am Professor Emeritus from Macalester College, where I taught sociology and education classes including death, dying, and bereavement, human sexuality, male socialization issues, and violence. And I also was a therapist, a filmmaker, a workshop leader, a men's group leader, boys group leader, and presented workshops all over the country, all over the U.S., including colleges and universities and healthcare centers and senior citizen places and so on. So I've been around, and what I'm really aware of these days is we talk about changing the world, having less violence. Just recently we had school shooting, 2 attempts on former President Trump to assassinate him. It's a very violent world, it's a very scary world, and we live in what I call empire consciousness. And empire consciousness comes out of trauma consciousness. Trauma consciousness is when people have lived through trauma, such as childhood abandonment and hurt and pain and suffering and abuse, they turn that into a way of seeing the world, and then that turns into empire consciousness, which is about power and control. Because early on, trauma comes from not having any power and control. The overreaction to that is empire consciousness. But the ultimate spiritual message from Jesus and others is oneness consciousness, where we love everyone. We try to create a peace-oriented, health-oriented, love-oriented world. And we can only do that if we work one person at a time, individually changing the consciousness of the culture. So I'm going to share with you today things about empire, first of all, and that would be about power and domination and control. There have been the British Empire, the Roman Empire, the American Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and we could go on about this. But there's always been dominating groups and groups that are marginalized and disempowered and become slaves in some form. All children are put in prisons because they are helpless to determine their own reality early on. They're told what to think and what to believe. So I'm going to share after a while about breaking out of the prisons of childhood, and then how to navigate toxic environments, and then what is the best ways to live and learn and love in the world. So it's a lot to do in a short amount of time, but it's really important stuff. So oneness consciousness, which is the Jesus message and the message of a lot of other spiritual belief systems, is about love, equality, sharing, abundance, compassion, empathy, and connection. Now, if we get to that, we believe that there's enough to go around and we don't have to keep killing each other. We don't have to keep hating each other. Because a lot of hatred is self-hatred projected outward. So we have trauma consciousness, empire consciousness, which comes from trauma, and then oneness consciousness, which is the spiritual antidote to suffering and pain and violence and addiction and domination and war. Tall order. So let's talk about being a child. When you grow up in a family, you're taught how to behave and what is true from parents who have their own point of view, who've been through their own issues, and maybe some of them have been abused, abandoned, or neglected. Anyway, no child gets away with maintaining their 100% authentic selves, because the parents and the extended family and the peer group and the culture sort of say, this is acceptable and this is not acceptable. So basically, all children are put into spiritual and emotional prisons where they have to act a certain way to receive the approval and love of other people. And we'll talk about that in greater depth. Many of us grew up in prisons, remaining, listening to rigid dogmas, cultural norms, and being locked in a prison means limited access to our wholeness and our personal power, and usually involves shame, control, and results in violence and addictive behavior. So the reason addictions work is because people want to escape the prisons, but the addictions don't ultimately escape the prisons because they create prisons of their own. So I'll go over what some of the prisons of childhood are. And most people don't talk about this in that way. They don't talk about a prison being a male socialization and female socialization model. They don't talk about it like that. They don't talk about it like it means religious dogma, one that promises a fear-based God, a judgmental God, and a punishing God. And you look at messages in especially the Old Testament, there's a lot of judgment and a lot of fear connected with God. So that's a projection of power, domination, and empire on spirituality. The prison of religious dogma and believing in a fear-based spiritual God is a prison. That's a prison, and that causes suffering and pain. There's also a prison of one's personal circumstances, being a minority, being limited in your abilities, being poor, being uncoordinated, having a funny face or body that is not typical. This is all can be prisons because you can be shamed for this, teased for this, put down for this, and ultimately beaten. So there is an abandonment process that is going on with the prisons. You're abandoned into the prison. Nobody helps you talk about how it feels to be in it, and very rarely do people help you get out of it. There is a song in South Pacific called "You've Got to Be Carefully Taught," but I think it's more than being carefully taught how to hate and how to be biased and prejudiced. I think you're taught to conform as a way of not rocking the boat, because empires have a stake in maintaining their empire power and domination. The cultural norms of femininity and masculinity and gender, very much those can be prisons too. Boys don't cry. Girls don't get angry. It's interesting because boys do cry and girls do get angry. And then when you're not allowed to express your full range of who you are, you grieve the loss of that, and you hurt, and you express that loss as negativity in the world, hurting yourself or other people, or putting other people down. So all bullying and all domination in the world comes out of self-protection and a need to project outward how you feel inward about yourself. The prison of abuse, neglect, and shaming parents. Letting the child know they're not good enough, or that they will be abandoned if they don't do certain things. So abandonment and fear of abandonment are also prisons. There's also the prison of peer pressure, social media comments, constant judgment, and external validation. We're taught very, very young that our sense of ourselves has to come from how other people view us. So we give our power away, or we have our power taken away, and other people's opinions become more important than our own inner feelings about ourselves. So what I am is none of your business. And people can think they know who you are and tell you who you are, but in reality, nobody knows the complexity of you and what you've been through. So you are the person who evaluates who you are and what you are, and other people don't have a clue. This kind of prison can result in a prison of self-hatred, depression, isolation, and fear. And all bullying is a prison because you feel like you're not free to be yourself or to even live. And you're afraid of being ostracized, marginalized, or killed. The prison of powerlessness as a child, being undervalued and being spoken for. So you don't have a voice sometimes as a child. And we live in a prison of narcissism, a narcissistic culture with people who have a lot, people who don't have anything, people who live in mansions, and people who live in the street. Prison of being, of empire consciousness is always there, even for the people at the top, because they have suffered also. To get to the top, they fear of not staying at the top. They believe they never have enough. So these prisons affect all kids in different degrees at different times. And the goal is to help people get out of prison and see who they really are and spiritually connect with a loving higher power or spiritual God and see that they are worthy and lovable. But how do you get there when the world and the people around you are forcing you as a small child to conform to norms that you've been told are the truth, but they're simply ways to control and dominate you? School is a perfect example. At 5 years old, you go to school. You have no idea what the spirituality of the teacher is. Your parents don't know what the belief system of the school is as far as valuing the individual. The school is caught up in a hierarchical domination situation, and that's what it produces and what it encourages. So the good papers are put on the bulletin board. The bad papers get D's and E's and F's and are shunned or put away. So in a way, all empire consciousness environments are toxic because they don't value you for who you are, and they don't see that there's enough for everyone, and they don't encourage compassion, empathy, and lovability, meaning everyone is worthy of being loved, and everyone is lovable, loving, and deserves to be loved. Now, if a person moves to their spirituality, that's one way you can get out of prison, by realizing your lovability and connecting spiritually with a love-based spiritual God in some form. It could be the universe, it could be whatever you want to call it, but there has to be a love-based connection. So toxic environments very often involve judgments against people, fear is always present, and addictions and distractions are always part of a toxic environment. There's always shaming going on, and there's the idea that some people are better than others and worth more than others. We've all been in toxic environments, and it's really scary to think about how much control they have. You can have a workplace that's toxic, a school that's toxic, a family that has a toxic environment. You could think of a friendship group, a peer group can have a toxic environment. So we hope to navigate these toxic environments by avoid them when you can, and if you get into them, maintain a low profile. It's interesting because if you are too vocal or too out there, you may cause other people to resent you and want to dominate you. So when you can, set clear boundaries and stick to them, and use what I call selective vulnerability. They don't talk a lot about selective vulnerability, but selective vulnerability is about being open in safe places, but not in toxic places or scary places or places where you're going to be hurt. So you set clear boundaries, you maintain your own dignity, but you have to think a certain way, and you take nothing personally. In other words, whatever people say or do about you is not really about you. It's about them projecting onto you. It's not your fault, and it's not your causing. You're not causing this to happen. Blame, shame, and control are part of toxic environments. You have to find healthy, supportive people to be open with and continue growing in love, compassion, and empathy. You can love the people who hurt you and hate you, but you can't necessarily and don't have to necessarily hang out with them. So part of what the spiritual message is, they know not what they do. If they knew better, they would do better. But I don't believe that that's totally true. I believe some people intentionally want to hurt other people. And if you become whole and a loving person and compassionate and point out anything real about toxic environments or empire consciousness, it will be threatening to some people, and they will try to silence you. That, to me, is the message of the crucifixion. But there is a resurrection. There is a resurrection. The resurrection is you still have yourself, and you can put into practice behaviors that protect you. Now, protection is important for people living in or working in or going to school in toxic environments. You want to be protected. You need to find people who will protect you, places that are safe, and love everywhere you can. We live in a world where there's too much negativity, scarcity thinking, control, domination, suppression, hatred, violence, and too much being concerned about what everybody else thinks, because we've been taught that early on. So I've come up with some general beliefs that help carry me through my life and have helped me, given that I was hurt, abandoned, shamed, bullied, and put down, made fun of, ridiculed, physically hurt in my childhood for numbers of years. The thing that's amazing is there's a resurrection, and you can make it through that and get past it. So the way I look at life is there are angels who come into your life who are there for you and help you happy, joyful, full of exuberance, compassionate, loving, peaceful, generous, kind. It's amazing how there are people like that, and they can help protect you and also help nurture that in you. So one of the goals we have in living in the world, living, learning, and loving, is to support and nurture the wholeness and the authenticity and lovability of every being and be one with the earth, ourselves, each other, and spirit. And that oneness makes us powerful in a different way instead of dominating, but powerful internally to spread love. And that's what we need to do. So I've come up with some of the ways to live, which I call a more loving life. And they are as follows. It's better to live in gratitude than in regret or resentment. It's a miracle to have survived what some people have survived. And when you start seeing the resilience and the miracle that people are, it's amazing and overwhelming. Forgiving others for hurting me does not mean it was right. People act at a level of their consciousness and awareness. I don't have to be around them. I can love them from a distance. But I can forgive them, but I also can help maybe some of them learn that there's a better way to live. One way to do that is to be a light in the world. And that's the Jesus message, be a light in the world. It makes no sense to compare myself to others, envy others, or judge others. I am me with my own experiences and my own perceptions, and everyone else is also themselves with their own experiences and their own perceptions. I'm enough, I do enough, I continue to do my best most of the time, and that's all I can do. The idea of not taking things personally means that hard things will happen, people will betray us, people will lie, people will try to abuse us, but it's never about us that they're doing it. It's always about where they're at. It comes out directed at us, but it's not about us. And the more you can disidentify with the world and what it does, the more free you are. Spending too much time in cultural values is exhausting and depressing. You have to be in the world, but not of the world. There's always been suffering, evil, and selfishness, and what we're trying to do is grow up with a sense of purpose, meaning, and love, so that we can find the good in the world, and we can help people heal, and we can help limit the amount of suffering that is going on. That means taking care of the environment, feeding the poor, helping people who are marginalized, and start seeing the divinity in the diversity. And stop just talking about how we're all different, but start seeing how we are all the same inside. Because we're all children of the universe. Every moment is an opportunity to share and spread love and healing energy. And there is nowhere to get to. We have everything we need. And the joy comes from the transformational process which we acknowledge in ourselves, which we appreciate because people have loved and cared for us, and which we can give to others. Find a support network and be supportive of other people's journeys. Jennifer James has a book called Success is the Quality of Your Journey. And success is a personal wholeness. It's not about achievements, and it's not about possessions, and it's not about wealth. Now, for a lot of people, the way you get there is through prayer, meditation, stillness, and worship, whatever that means to you. But I do think that the more connected you could be to your own lovability and the fact that you have been spiritually blessed, the easier it is to see the world where it's at and know that you could play a part in making it a better place. So what I want to wish you is wholeness, peace, and love, and healing energy for yourself, and also so that you can use your energy to help heal the world that is hurting and suffering, because we are all lights and we have the capability and the possibility of making a major difference by how we live and how we love and our compassion and empathy. Thank you and bless you.